I want to ask you a question. Coming back here, what is this? What is this wisdom? What is this understanding? What is it? What is wisdom in your mind?
Knowledge gained from experience and learning.
That's great. Knowledge gained from experience and learning, yeah. Any other?
I was going to say like acquired experiential.
Acquired experiential knowledge, yeah. Is it only knowledge?
Can be intuition, couldn't it?
Could be intuition, yeah. Absolutely.
Just a sense of...
I've read some very good articles about intuition in nurses about 20 years ago. Very, very good. Intuition is actually, the way they described it in this paper was, and they said, by the way, that good nurses are intuitive nurses. What they have is they have so much experience in their memory about a particular presentation that all that experience, all that knowledge isn't always accessible. Like it's not in the forefront of their mind all the time. But intuition works in a way where it can access the memory so they know something's happening or they know what to do. And they don't know how they know, but they know.
Yeah, I think that's pattern you're referring to.
Oh, is it? Yeah.
Skill pattern recognition, where you see enough that you can do a very quick assessment. You just
do it, yeah.
a quick scan, and you kind of go, oh, okay, this seems to be blah blah blah.
Yeah. Yeah, it sort of gets like that. You know, you can.
She talks from novice to expert.
Yeah, I know that I've been a psychologist for over 20 years now, 23 years or 24 years, something like that. And you take it for granted because I supervise, different psychologists, and they'll come along and they'll say something, and you think, well, you just know that. That's sort of, you don't even think about it. But you realise the way you don't think about it is because, the reason you don't think about it is because it's there. It's accessible knowledge. It's intuition.
And sometimes it's because you're looking at it from a different way. Like if you go into ED,
yeah,
and then they say, oh, this is for you. And you go, no, in your mind, I knew once instantly that person had a brain tumour, and that's what they had.
Really?
I just knew that.
Yeah.
But the ED staff was so fixed on it being mental health.
Oh, yeah.
So when I come and look at it, because I've got a background in triaging EDs,
yeah,
I go, oh no, this isn't it.
Oh, very good.
So sometimes it's almost like it is in intuition, it just comes to you. It's
Yeah, yeah.
so clear that you don't know where it comes from.
And wisdom, I think wisdom is like this too. Sometimes we can verbalise what we're knowing, and sometimes we can't necessarily. We just know.
Yeah, yes, you can't substantiate it.
This thing about, I think that it's not just knowledge, by the way. It is the ability to act on your knowledge. It's not just insight. It's this capacity to act and the intention to act. So hence we have wisdom. The way wisdom is defined on that path is understanding and intention. And it's being able to follow through with actions based on your understanding. Oh, good. Is this useful to talk about this? And oh, look, here's a citation. To be honest, I've asked this question, what is wisdom, to nearly every group that I've run, both here in mental health and also with asylum seekers and many different places. There used to be a time where I would just say to people, this is what wisdom is, and I felt really uncomfortable with that. So I took to asking people what they thought, because it was much more powerful if it would be meaningful for them. It's been an honour to hear what different individuals say. I've run some programs specifically for people with bipolar disorder. And they really like that question because they can see, how their actions have caused them so much suffering, particularly when they're manic. And then after we have a discussion about wisdom, I give them a quote from Thanissaro Bhikkhu, who's an American-born Buddhist monk. He lives in the States now. He used to live in Thailand. He's done some really, really good books. Anyway, this particular citation or quotation came from a paper called Integrity of Emptiness, which was a really great paper. But anyway, he said this: the Buddha had a simple test for measuring wisdom. You're wise, he said, to the extent you can get yourself to do things you don't like doing, but know will result in happiness, and refrain from things you like doing, but know will result in pain and harm. You like it? I've only had a couple of people say they don't like it. They were psychologists. They said, "Oh, wisdom's much more than just that. That's a bit negative, don't you think?" But it's not exclusive to that definition, but it's a bit, it's quite a nice. So the people with bipolar disorder would really appreciate that, and they could see sometimes it's hard to short-circuit their manic urges, but if they can, it's going to lead to happiness and well-being in the future, or at least not sort of falling into that descending spiral, or elevating spiral of mania, and the descending spiral of depression. So how do we develop wisdom? That's another question I've often asked, and we have lots of discussion in groups. I'll just tell you, if you like. Well, the way I develop wisdom is often through hearing or reading wise words, and you could compare this to psychoeducation, like just getting an understanding of something from someone else, a book or a video or YouTube or whatever. Another way is to reflect and think about something, and this is utilised by cognitive therapy, where you might assess a situation, or you evaluate a situation, or you look at your thoughts and so on, and you challenge those sorts of thoughts that may be not helpful, and instead you endeavour to utilise thoughts that may be helpful in your process. So it's about reflecting on things. So that's a good way of developing wisdom. But the other way is learning through experience, of course. Do you agree? Which brings us to meditation. So wisdom can result from meditation. And I've got the picture of the lotus here. That's a symbol. That's a symbol of... it's actually a symbol of meditation practice. And the reason why it's like that, the reason it's a symbol is because from the sludge at the bottom of the pond, where there's a lot of smelly mud and compost and crap and all those sorts of other things, something beautiful can grow. And the beautiful thing that grows is wisdom. And the sludge and slime and mud and smelly compost at the bottom of the pond is our difficult experiences, like our stress. Believe it or not, one way we can be stress-free is by looking at stress, understanding it, and allowing our stress to transform to non-stress, to wisdom, and all the positive things that can come from being wise. Does that make sense? Yes, no, I'm looking at your expressions. I think everybody...
I must say that in life experience, often the most painful times in my life have also been the most...
enlightening.
Well, yeah, enlightening, but also transformation.
That's it, yeah. Yeah, look, I did ask this... I would have taught probably about 160 or 150 groups on Christmas Island. Sometimes the groups varied, as small as about 5 or 6 people, as large as 60 or 70 people. It was always different. And we often got on the topic of wisdom and how you develop wisdom. I used to ask them the question, and these people are in a lot of uncertainty, as you can imagine. A lot of difficulty. Most of them are really highly traumatised from their homeland, if not from their homeland, from the boat trip across from Java through to Christmas Island. They're really in a difficult place, and especially when I was seeing them. I left there in July last year, and all the government changes. It was so difficult for them. Some were being, the poor Sri Lankans, the poor Tamils were being flown back to Colombia, and people were being sent off to Manus Island then, and off to Nauru and so on. Really, really difficult. And sometimes it would be difficult to focus on the topic of what we're doing. They would be asking me questions about, what do you know about the policy? Why is the policy changing? And can you get me a visa and all the rest of it? And I'd say, look, I can't do any of that. I'm a psychologist. I can only help you find a bit of kind of relief somehow in all that. Somehow a perspective that can be liberating. And I would often make reference to Nelson Mandela as being in jail, or Viktor Frankl as being in a concentration camp, and Aung San Suu Kyi as being in home prison. Although I had to be careful, I wouldn't make that reference with the Rohingyas, who are refugees from Burma, Muslim refugees who are persecuted by Buddhist governments, and also Tamils. I was always very careful about too much reference to, well, I didn't make any reference to teachings of the Buddha in those classes, in those courses, because the Tamils were persecuted by the Sinhalese government, persecuted and at war many times, put in prison, and they understand that as a Buddhist government. So one had to be very careful. Anyway, coming back to what we used to do, I used to say to them, we'd get this understanding that wisdom is quite helpful, and it's the way you can be free. Then I would ask them, have you ever seen someone who's got a lot of wisdom who hasn't been through a difficult time? Have you ever? And they would always say no. So part of the way that you can make, kind of bring lightness to your heart, I suppose. Part of the way you can feel a little bit better in the midst of suffering is to realise that it is transformative. That's one positive thing about stress. That once you look at it, understand it, you can, and be willing to be present with it, it can be transformative. Just like the lotus. And that's the whole symbology behind that. So I told you about this before. Meditation, one way it's translated is bhavana, which means bringing to being. What we cultivate with meditation, if you go remember that path, is insight and serenity. Insight is knowing, seeing clearly, understanding. Serenity is a kind of a peacefulness, a calmness, a stillness, rather than this agitation. There's some qualities to serenity. These qualities are relaxation, a steadiness of mind, and a vividness of our perceptions, a stillness, a clarity, almost like a luminosity. Like when you become really, really concentrated, when your mind becomes, you have a samadhi, where there's your attention is gathered and placed in one spot, everything else falls away. It's like flow. Everything else just falls away. You do what you're doing wonderfully, and it is uplifting. Your mind is not disturbed by all sorts of things coming in and hassling you. like thoughts about this, thoughts about the past, thoughts about the future, thoughts about the past, and so on, your mind becomes very clear. So clear that it's like luminous. It illuminates whatever you're seeing. And it illuminates itself as well. Anyway. So, with Serenity meditation, there's different types of meditation. There's different ways we can practice. With Serenity meditation, which is the cultivation of serenity, if you want to look at those words put in a different way, what happens is, what we do is we maintain attention on one thing rather than the attention being sort of scattered everywhere. Like for example, if we're doing a mantra meditation, which is mostly the cultivation of serenity, what we would do is we'd focus on the mantra and not worry about anything else. Thoughts come along, we just sort of let them come and go. We don't buy into them. And because we're not buying into them, we don't feed them, we don't get carried away by them. We're just maintaining our attention on one thing. We could choose to focus on a candle. Same process. Focusing on the candle, mind goes off, you don't struggle with it, you don't beat it up, you don't do anything, you don't feed it. You just remember to bring your attention back to this, back to this, back to this. You could do it on your breath. Mind goes off, bring it back. Breath now, breath now, breath now. What happens is you experience this stilling and this stabilising and the settling of your heart. You experience a relaxation as well. There's a tranquility of both body and mind. There's a calming of both body and mind. In terms of body, that refers to relaxation, reduction of tension, and in terms of mind, it means a stillness, a calmness, and it's very nourishing. It's lovely. So, Serenity meditation soothes emotional and physical disturbance. It helps us feel at ease, relaxed, happy, peaceful, and serene. It creates a sense of composure and integration. You're not kind of pulled in 100 different directions. You're just there with that. Is this familiar with some of you? Serenity meditation is what we used to understand as meditation when people used to say, I want to meditate. You're focusing on a candle or mantra or visualization. This is what you're focusing on. Insight meditation, or the cultivation of insight, has a different angle to it. It's a different aspect. With insight meditation, you inquire and investigate into things. And you develop an understanding of yourself and the world around it. Hi. Hi. Sorry? Oh yeah, okay, thanks. So with insight meditation, or the cultivation of insight, you're emphasising mindfulness, you're inquiring into the way things work, and you begin to understand cause-effect relationships and how things change. That makes sense, doesn't it? Can I just go back, just to clarify that a little bit more? What we actually look at is cause-effect relationships. We see what leads to what. We start to see, when I have this thought, I might have that emotion. When I go and do this action, this is the response of that person, and so on and so forth. You're kind of learning about life and learning about yourself. Another thing you're paying attention to is the nature of experience. Like, for example, how everything changes. And if you can pay attention to, say, something simple like, I'll be symbolic here, a leaf falling off a tree, or the impermanence of the sensations in your abdomen as your stomach rises and falls with the breath, you can generalise that understanding to mental things like thoughts and emotions and so on. So then you start to see, oh, just because I'm having that thought doesn't mean it's going to last forever, or I'm having an emotion, it's not going to last forever. So your ability to have some resilience or to bounce back from a disturbing emotion is more enhanced. So you're not feeding into the emotion. Like when we have a painful emotion, often we'll be starting to feed into it and fuel it, and there's this belief that it's going to last forever. But if we start to get an understanding of a characteristic of all things are that they are impermanent, then this is greatly relieving. So what we have is, with meditation, you have the practice of concentration or samadhi, you have the practice of mindfulness. And if you were to draw meditation on a spectrum, you would have mindfulness at one end of the spectrum and samadhi or concentration at the other end of the spectrum. And in correlation with that, you would have serenity at the concentration end of the spectrum and insight at the mindfulness end of the spectrum. Now, these qualities of these mental factors of mindfulness and concentration can't be separated. This spectrum, you can imagine it like a stick. If you pick up one end of the stick, the other end naturally follows. So you can't separate them. Meditation involves both concentration and mindfulness, but the ratio of one to the other varies depending on where you are on this spectrum. So sometimes you might be emphasizing absorption and getting totally concentrated on an object, and your mind's becoming absorbed in that object. You're getting into flow, like as the way Csikszentmihalyi describes it. Flow is this optimal state of being where everything else falls away. You're just kind of into what you're doing, like sportsmen and artists, and actually surgeons are another group of individuals that seem to be able to cultivate flow quite well. So they're really getting into what they're doing. So what we're doing, what's happening there is that's a serenity meditation, and that's at one end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum could be like just sitting with your eyes open, watching. Yeah, there is a meditation practice in Zen called, what's it called? Chikkantasa. I think that's it. Anyway, with this meditation practice, you don't focus on anything. You just sit and look at a wall. You don't even look at the wall. Your eyes are open and you're facing a wall. And you're just being now, aware. So that would be at this end of the spectrum. But sometimes we go backwards and forwards between whether we're very concentrated or we're very aware. But we'll always have awareness and concentration in the process of meditation. Make sense?
Well, it didn't make sense to me, that last bit, because if you're just sitting kind of staring into space, facing a wall, that would, I don't see the insight thing in there.
Well, the way it works is that you're being present with reality as it presents itself. You're aware of what's going on now. The reality of now is now. The reality of life is actually now is all there is. And there's a few books written by this. Eckhart Tolle's that's the message that Eckhart Tolle presents, the power of now. And it's actually quite true. Freedom comes from being now. And if you really look closely into that, if you practice being now, then it gets stronger and stronger. This realization becomes stronger. So there's no problems, there's no future, there's no past, there's just now. This is the practicality of it. And if you want to look at it from another perspective, it's like you're gaining insight and understanding about yourself. When you sit and do nothing, it's an amazing amount of stuff comes up. It's like you're plumbing the depths of consciousness, and all this stuff comes up. Even though you don't want to know about it, it comes up because you're not distracting yourself from other things. It comes up and it presents, and you have to process it and deal with it, and you learn from it. Anyway, this workshop isn't about teaching you chicken tasa, but it's about looking at how mindfulness can be used in your life, both personal life and your professional lives, as a way to be free from stress. Okay. So, any questions? Shall we move on to experiential exercises? All right. I might turn off the